All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep dive into a fascinating piece of oral tradition from the Manggarai people. It's called the Legend of Sano Limbung. Now, right off the bat, we're not going to treat this as just some simple ancient bedtime story. We're going to break it down because what's amazing here is how it brilliantly blends history, sociology, and frankly, a pretty terrifying mythological disaster. As we go through this, you're going to see exactly how indigenous communities use these epic, larger-than-life stories as a highly effective tool to literally encode their laws and enforce a really profound respect for the natural world. So here is the huge, burning question that kicks this all off. Imagine waking up and an entire, thriving village has just vanished, completely wiped from the face of the earth overnight. How does that happen? That is the central mystery of Kampung Lada, which is the village at the absolute heart of our story. For our purposes today, we're looking at this source material essentially as an anthropological fable. It's a cautionary tale, and it tackles the absolute worst-case scenario of what actually goes down when a community's moral compass completely, utterly shatters. Okay, to really understand this disaster, we have to look at the geography and how this place started. It all begins with Generation 1, these respected ancestors named Nenek Lujong and his wife who first settled the area. They have 3 kids. Fast forward a bit to Generation 3 and beyond, and the descendants of one of those kids, Impono Dabar, just multiply rapidly. They form this massive, sprawling settlement known as Kampung Lada. And this is absolutely crucial context to keep in mind, life back then was defined by extreme isolation. We're talking incredibly difficult terrain, so social interaction with anyone outside of Kampung Lada was pretty much non-existent. People really only interacted with their own local relatives. Now, you can probably guess that this extreme, sustained isolation created a bit of a pressure cooker. Eventually, it led to a really severe violation of the community's most sacred customary laws. Totally cut off from the outside world, some members of the community started crossing a forbidden line. They broke the rule of Hengto Tendanangto Nipu. In Manggarai culture, this is a very strict customary norm that completely prohibits intimate relationships between siblings. And listen, this wasn't just treated as some mild, frowned-upon taboo. This was literally the bedrock of their entire social structure. It was the one rule designed specifically to prevent their society from collapsing inward on itself. When this sacred rule was broken, the community actually had a very specific word for it: jurak. Now, this term is reserved for highly disgraceful behavior, but it goes way, way deeper than just social shame. In their indigenous belief system, breaking this taboo was viewed as a profound, catastrophic disruption of both the social order and the natural order. To commit jurak wasn't just a human failing, it was seen as a direct, dangerous insult to the laws of nature itself. As you might expect, this behavior deeply, deeply fractured the village. It split right down the middle. On one side, you've got the village elders. They are the keepers of tradition, and they're desperately, constantly warning the community to preserve their moral conduct. Stop doing this, right? But on the other side, there's this stubborn faction of the descendants who completely, blatantly ignore the warnings. They just kept going. What they failed to realize was that their actions were essentially building up this massive, invisible debt, a debt that was absolutely going to bring disastrous consequences down upon everyone. Which brings us to a terrifying narrative pivot in the story. Seriously, what actually happens when the laws of nature are broken so fundamentally? Well, according to the myth of Sano Limbung, when humanity continuously ignores the boundaries set by the natural world eventually pushes back. Hard. The elders had failed to stop the descendants, the taboo was completely shattered, the social fabric was basically ruined. And now, nature was about to respond. The result was this incredibly apocalyptic event that the locals named the Reno Catastrophe. The source material paints a genuinely grim picture of this. First, with zero warning, the land beneath Kampung Lada just suddenly collapses. Second, the entire settlement literally sinks right into the earth. And third, that whole lineage, it just disappears entirely. The myth even makes a point to note that the cries of the villagers couldn't stop it. Nature was demanding total accountability. In one swift, brutal stroke, the whole village was wiped completely off the map. But wait, here is the most fascinating part of the whole legend. Amidst this total annihilation of a massive, thriving settlement, amidst the literal collapse of the earth and the erasure of an entire bloodline, there was exactly one survivor. Just one. That sole survivor was a man named Impolo Lados. Now, how did he survive the Great Reno Catastrophe? Was it some magical vision? A special power? A warning from the gods? No, not at all. Impololatos survived simply because he literally just happened to be out of town. He was away visiting his wife's village in Ranking. By pure, sheer luck of just not being there, he was spared the horrific destruction that claimed his entire community. And it's his incredibly lucky, mundane survival that is the only anomaly that allowed this terrifying story to even be carried forward to the present day. Now, if you're listening to this, you might be asking, did the Reno catastrophe really happen exactly like this? Like, did a giant sinkhole literally swallow an entire village as cosmic punishment for incest? Well, for the Manggarai people who tell this story today, the literal historical accuracy isn't really the point. What actually matters is the enduring moral lesson. This myth serves a highly vital anthropological purpose. It acts as a vessel. It's how they transmit crucial, non-negotiable societal values across generations. So think of this tale as an incredibly powerful tool for enforcing community laws. It's essentially an unwritten legal code. First off, it instills this shared collective memory of the consequences of unethical actions. The sheer fear of another Reno keeps people in line. Second, it strongly reinforces why preserving social norms matters. And finally, it teaches the youth to really respect the traditions they inherited from their ancestors. By wrapping a really strict legal ban inside this terrifying blockbuster story of a sinking village, the elders basically guaranteed that the rule would be respected long, long after they were gone. And this perfectly illustrates the core philosophy of the legend. There's a quote from the source texts that hits the nail on the head. Nature possessed laws that must be respected by humans. Every human action would affect the balance of nature. This is so much bigger than just human-to-human ethics. It is a profoundly deep ecological mindset. The Sano Limbung myth is fundamentally teaching that when humanity acts disgracefully, the earth itself actually feels the weight of that disruption. Which leaves us with this final thought. In our modern, hyper-interconnected world, one that is obviously vastly different from the ancient, isolated Kampung Lada, how do we enforce our own laws of nature to maintain our social balance? We might not be looking over our shoulders fearing the ground is literally going to open up and swallow us overnight, but the core lesson here remains strikingly relevant, doesn't it? Ignoring the ethical guardrails of our society inevitably leads to some kind of collapse. I really hope this explainer has given you a fresh perspective on how ancient myths actually function as the bedrock of human survival. Thanks so much for joining me today, and definitely keep questioning the stories that shape our world.